Rev-Up office numbers are 572-0383 and 572-0215. Rev-Up St. Lucia, the alpha of radio.
Join the United Workers' Party this and every Thursday on Rev-Up St. Lucia 97.1 FM for an educational and informative program, Meet the Opposition. Participate in exciting discussions from 9 a.m. to 10:30 a.m. Be in the know every Thursday on Rev-Up St. Lucia 97.1 from 9 a.m. to 10:30 a.m.
It's now time for Meet the Opposition, hosted by Lenard Spider Montoute. Mr. Montoute, welcome once again.
Yes, good morning, Andre. Good morning to listeners and viewers. And it's a pleasure to be here again to host Meet the Opposition for today. You said what's 3rd of July?
That's right.
Yes, and let me just say, we are happy to have those of you who are listening to us on radio, those of you who are on live stream, whatever means or medium that you're using, we are happy to have you. Today I have a guest who will be arriving very shortly, who will be here for the duration of the program. And of course, at some point, we will be opening up the lines. When my guest comes in, I will introduce him, but at some point we'll be opening up the lines. You may have some questions for him. Some of you may want to have some comments or express some concerns. We do not restrict the subject, so to speak, but we touch on just about everything that is of concern and interest to St. Lucians. And Andre, I want to start this morning, because we have not done so on Meet the Opposition, by expressing our condolences to Constable 642, that is K9 Tyson. Mm-hmm. And that in itself is another scandal. And we have a government that is surrounded by all kinds of scandals. It is amazing, it is alarming, and it is very disturbing to me that up to now, we have not heard a word from a government official on this major development. Mm-hmm. And I wouldn't say it's a development, on this major disaster. And it is one thing in the absence of information for people like myself to have my suspicions and for me to speculate. But when I hear an official report from the police confirming that the death of that K9 police dog is suspicious, to the extent that they are going to carry out an investigation, which, by the way, means nothing to me. I've heard a million times we're carrying out investigations. I've never heard the outcome of the investigation. So, as usual, if I'm to go by what is the norm, it means that we are done with that. Okay, so they're saying to me, we're carrying out investigation. In other words, that's the end of the story. But I wish they would actually carry out the investigation for many reasons. Because, Andre, you and I may have our dogs as our personal pets and so on, and we develop all kinds of sentiments towards it in terms of, love for the animal, and maybe some people even become inseparable from their pets and things like that. But this was not just a dog. This was a police dog that was trained for a purpose and had made a significant impact on the crime landscape of St. Lucia. And when things happen, I tend not to look at things in isolation, but I tend to try to connect dots, and especially in the absence of information, I try to make sense of things. And so the dog's death had me thinking and brought me back to the fact that we once had a K9 unit, and back in 2022, it was suddenly disbanded. The K9 unit was disbanded, and the excuse was that it was too expensive because it would cost $40,000 a month. I have heard the former commissioner Daisy, publicly state that those dogs more than compensate for the cost that is expended on them. And so when we talk about, I heard someone on another talk show, well, I would say it on Newspin yesterday, talking about the value of the dogs as opposed to the cost of the dogs. So it costs $40,000, but what is the value of those dogs? Now, we heard from the French ambassador who said it costs $20,000, to prepare one of those dogs. And remember, it's a gift from the French to us. And so it costs $20,000 US And it costs $40,000 a month to maintain them. Andre, I'm tempted to ask you to put a cost on a human life, but I know what you're going to say to me. There's no value you can place on human life. When I see what the dog has done, you and I have no idea how many lives that the dog has saved. Because when I hear that the dog assisted the police, in discovering illicit drugs, cocaine, to the tune of $4 million. $4 million. We can look at just the value of the drugs. That's one thing. But I am looking at that drug, making it to the market, which is on the streets. How many lives it would destroy? How much crime would ensue as a result of that drug being in circulation? Because this one steal, this one drug, this one didn't pay, this one for his drugs and so on. And they have their own justice system in that world. We know that. When I heard of, that 17 guns were discovered by the dog, along with 3,000 rounds of ammunition.
Not just guns, illegal.
Illegal, yeah. And I don't know much about guns, but from what I'm hearing, I'm speaking to a police officer, there were high-powered guns among them. And the police officer, again, I'm just going by what he said, he ought to know, he was in that business, said to me that one of the guns he noticed, the Glock or whatever it is, would cost at least $4,000. Okay, we had 17 of different kinds. From what I understand, were real high-powered weapons. So I can safely say perhaps 17 by at least 4,000. I do not know the value of the ammunition. 3,000 rounds. That, we can go by the value of that alone and ask yourself if the dog would. But I'm not going by that, Andre. I'm asking the question. We do not know where those guns were destined to be, but let us assume it was for the streets of St. Lucia. Those 17 guns and 3,000 rounds of ammunition, by now, do we know how many people could have been killed? Going forward, do you know how many people would have been killed by that? So when you're looking at the value of those dogs, you have to take all of those things into consideration. And so I think that was just an excuse. And if they were serious about that statement, it only emphasized and underscored the myopia of the leaders that we have in office today. To think that it is too much to pay $40,000 for dogs that are so useful. I also have my suspicion, and while I'm not big into conspiracies and so on, conspiracy theories, I also have my suspicion as to why those occurrences take place, those incidents take place. Because I am one who believes, Andre, that in a small country like St. Lucia, there's not much of a grand scale that will take place that people will not know. And that business, for it to thrive, you need collaboration at different levels. And to have a successful drug trade, a successful crime ring in a small St. Lucia, there are high officials who may have been influenced and participating in that network. And so when you see a government, and let us not forget, just before they disbanded the K9 unit, okay, we heard talk that the scanners all of a sudden all went bad. Whatever liquid fell in them and all that kind of thing. So, when you look at those coincidences, you ask yourself questions. And I know too that with the kind of money that is in circulation there, it is enough to pay people to turn their heads. It is enough to pay people to close their eyes. It is enough to pay people to keep their mouth shut. And it is enough to pay people to facilitate the process of that crime ring that is going on. And so you have to wonder, you have to ask yourself whether there aren't people who are well placed, who are facilitating the process. And so when a dog, highly trained dog, Andre, if you, I do not know what the situation is with you, but if you or any St. Lucian has a dog that you cherish a little, you let him go as far as having your dog indoors, because your dog cannot be outside. Mm-hmm. And no insult meant, but it's just an ordinary dog you have. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. You're talking about a specialized, highly trained dog that is performing such a national service. Let me correct that. Regional service, possibly international service. Because if St. Lucia has been named as a transshipment point for drugs and ammunition and guns and so on. So that's why I put in the regional and possibly international. And you're going to tell me, isn't that dog expected to be... Isn't that dog... Well, I just want to acknowledge the arrival of the deputy political leader of the United Workers' Party and not parliamentary representative as yet, but endorsed candidate for the constituency of Castries South East, Mr. Guy Joseph. And good morning, sir, and welcome to Meet the Opposition.
Good morning to you. Good morning to listeners. And Andre, it's been a while, Andre. It's nice to be on Meet the Opposition this morning on Rev-Up.
Andrea told me to bring you here.
Nice seeing you again.
Yeah.
So, and before I take on my guest, and I will have him comment on the issue I'm discussing as well. But I was saying that when you consider that role that dog was playing, into possibly even of international and regional importance, you would think that is a valuable asset that you have in your crime-fighting arsenal, that dog would get royal treatment, that dog would be protected, and that dog would be kept safe. And for you to hear that they believe the dog ate rat poison or some foolishness like we heard, while in the control of the police, that has to raise eyebrows. Now, I'm not one for unofficial information, but then I take the liberty to repeat unofficial information when the officials refuse to provide us with official information. So I heard that the dog was actually, it took a while before we knew, because let me let you know, the day you knew that Tyson died, it had been dead for days already. I was told that the dog was buried, okay? And they had to exhume the dog to perform the post-mortem.
You're kidding me.
Okay? If that is so, that further raises more suspicion. Now,
was that a reliable source?
A reliable source said so to me.
Oh.
Now, I listened to the French ambassador here in St. Lucia. Now, let me tell you the significance of what I'm saying there. The dog and other dogs were gifted to us by the French government as a gift to St. Lucia in our crime fighting. And while I would say, I would be thankful, grateful, and I would say, thanks for their generosity, it goes beyond that. There is some self-interest for them as well. Martinique is next door. It is known that a lot of drugs go through St. Lucia to Martinique. We know that we have a situation where even St. Lucians have been found in Martinique with guns and committing crimes over there and so on. So it is in their national interest, their national security interest, for us to have our act together here in St. Lucia in that regard. So I'm not saying that is the sole reason why they give us the dog, and we are grateful for the generosity, but they have given us dogs for that purpose. Now, what are we saying to the French when we get an asset such as this and we are careless enough? Let us assume what is said is true, that it ate rat poison.
Mm-hmm.
And Andre, I remember years ago when I was much younger, we had a dog. That dog would only eat from us. Okay? And my brother was the one training the dog. My brother doesn't know anything about training dogs. I mean, nothing on a professional level. That dog, because I remember our neighbors once or twice threw poison over for the dog. They just go smell it and not eat it. That dog would only eat what we gave the dog.
And especially that dog in particular.
That dog.
Can you imagine that dog, specially trained dog, going to pick up some
Andre,
poison?
I cannot imagine you coming with a chicken leg in your hand and giving it to that dog and the dog will take it. I don't think that will happen. Okay? There are police officers who know better than I do, who can correct me on that if I'm wrong. And how likely it is for a highly trained dog like that should be living a posh life in terms of how it's been treated, that dog should be more assured of its meals than I am, of my own meals, would be scavenging around to eat rat poison. That in itself is highly suspicious. But you know what I heard the gentleman say? The gentleman say that we had a similar situation 10 years ago. Now, Tyson has made his name big, and Tyson, and the opposition made a big deal about the fact that the government disbanded the K9 unit and so. So those of us on the streets now know about K9 unit, we're conscious of it. Back then, it wasn't as out there, but it happened back then. He made mention of it. Something happened 10 years ago. Andre, there's a reason why he made mention of it. Now, I looked at this gentleman, and even if I did not know who he was, I would tell you, Mitt is a diplomat, because he could not be more diplomatic. I can only imagine the words Mitt wanted to, well, let me not say Mitt, out of respect, the gentleman. I could only imagine the words that this gentleman wanted to use, but I can tell he was suppressing and concealing his genuine feeling about that situation, And he too asked that the matter be investigated. Everybody's suspicious. And if everybody's suspicious, Andre, that's what appears like smoke that you see in there. Because I remember one time, it was like a friend of mine who said, well, where there's smoke, there's fire. He said, that's not smoke, that's vapor from ice. But where there is smoke, there is fire. And if everyone is suspicious, there is a reason why everyone is suspicious. The police themselves talk about the investigation, which I don't put much faith in, sorry. He asked for an investigation. I know they must be pissed off with us. They must be looking at us in a certain light and so on.
Even the French.
The French. And it is a bigger slap in the face for what is happening now to what seemed to be the fact that our leaders don't care. They don't even care enough to make a comment, Andre, about it. But I'm hoping that they will take instead into consideration the reaction of St. Lucians, because I can tell you, I don't know many St. Lucians who have died who have got an outpouring of concern, sympathy, and so on, like Tyson has gotten. So I'm hoping they will take that into consideration. And remember, it's about us, not necessarily the leaders. Because I always say, I am happy to have a Tyson and the other dog. I forget the name, but they say it's translated to mean gangster, the other dog that the French gave us. I'm happy to have them, intercept those drugs and ammunition and guns that they don't get on the street. Because unlike the Prime Minister, who's a Minister of National Security, who doesn't seem to care, unlike other ministers, I am not walking around with bodyguards. The average St. Lucian does not have security detail to protect them. And even if you stay far away from all shady dealings, Andre, you might just be walking past the wrong place at the wrong time and end up in a crossfire. So it is of concern to all of us. Not to mention, nowadays I have grandchild. My children, I'm hoping, are old enough and smart enough to know that they should stay away. None of them, thank God, have gotten involved in the use of drugs and so on. But I cannot be with my child or grandchild 24 hours to protect them from the use of those things. And once it's out there, the risk exists. So it is of concern to all of us, But I'm saying to the French ambassador that we are forever grateful for that gift. We are grateful for the role that Tyson played while alive, and we are concerned about this latest development as well. So, while they would really be within their right to tell us go to hell because we're not serious, I'm hoping that will not be the case, that we can get replacement dogs. I already said, given their financial whatever it is and so on, you're not sure right now, and so on. But it strikes me, and I want to really emphasize the fact that, when the bus was made, Tyson and the other police officers and whoever made the bus, I saw the police commissioner flanked by all those high officials call a press conference and to boast about their great achievement. That was, I lauded it. I gave praise to the police, although I expressed the fact that my concern in the fact that, look, that bus was made, $4 million worth of drugs, 17 guns, 3,000 rounds of ammunition. Nobody was arrested. Now, Andre, if it comes through our port, if this cup comes through our port, Andre, it should have my name on it because it was meant for me. So nobody's charged, nobody's arrested. That is of concern to me. But you see, at the end of the day, the dogs uncover the drugs, because even if my name was written on it, in all the training they give Tyson, I don't think Tyson can read. You know, to say, well, that's spider there. Let me not, expose whatever illegal substance that is there. The dog will just expose it. And given the amount of money that is involved there and so on, I figure Tyson was doing too much of a good job. So, if Tyson is affecting a whole network, this high worth crime ring and so on, Tyson need to be gotten rid of. And I'm speculating, I'm making no bones about my speculation. Okay? Tyson should be gotten rid of. And perhaps that is what brought about Tyson's demise. So, if the St. Lucia government wants to restore some credibility, they have to ensure that an independent investigation is carried out, that we are made aware of the outcome of that investigation, and in the process, wherever the hammer must fall, let it fall. Because if we're serious about crime, we have to take it from the top. And that we're talking about there right now. But no little fellow on the street would have access to doing whatever it is that was done to that dog. And if some fellow on the street had access to it, some higher head has to rule, because that is not supposed to be. Mm-hmm. And that is what I will say for now on the issue of Tyson, or should I say Constable 642 K9 Tyson. And so that was a great loss to St. Lucia, and more than we will ever know. Because I'm sure there was other small busts that took place, maybe 2 guns in a barrel and so on that we didn't hear of. But 2 guns in a barrel can take 20 lives on the streets. And that is where I'm talking about the value of the dog, as opposed to the 20,000 US that it costs to prepare the dog and the 40,000 to maintain it. Okay, that is chicken feed compared to what it is worth in terms of what the dogs are delivering to us as a country in the crime fighting effort. So, Guy, I'm anxious to hear your views on that matter. I was talking about Constable 642 K9 Tyson, police dog.
Thank you. It's nice to be here, as I indicated. But we must understand the fundamental approach towards crime fighting in St. Lucia. What is the method that we are using? Our old methods of policing cannot solve our crime issues. And that is why you have more sophisticated means of fighting crime. So we had the scanners at the ports. We were told they were asked to pressure wash the scanners, and the water from the pressure wash went into the scanner. Other people tell you the water was poured into the scanner. Up to now, has these scanners been replaced? So let's go back to the K9 unit, because there is a genesis to that maybe the focus is on Tyson. But prior to Tyson, there was a K9 unit. And the K9 unit proved to be very, very effective. Now, the Prime Minister, who is the Minister for National Security, was the one who disbanded the K9 unit on the basis of cost. And that is why I'm going back there, because it is important for us to understand how everything has unfolded. When we had the K9 unit, and it was called, I think we had free handlers, we had free dogs, and you had the vehicles, because they were carrying out operations as police officers. I mean, anywhere you travel in the world, Andre, you go to the UK, you go to the US, any first world country, your bags, at random, the dogs just pass through and would just be sniffing and would be able to pick up anything illegal that somebody may be carrying. And I mean, there are so many documentaries on this thing. But going back to the decision by a prime minister and a Minister of National Security at that. The Prime Minister holds the highest office in the land, and he holds one of the most critical offices as minister, which is national security. If your country is not secure, then you really don't have a country. The decision was made on the basis of $40,000 a month. There are 12 months in a year, Andre. 12 fours is 48. That's $480,000. Am I right?
Yeah.
40 by 10 is 400. Yeah. 480. So when a prime minister says that $480,000 a year, so in his 5-year term, 5 fours is 20, $2.2 million in 5 years on a K9 unit is too much money to spend for national security. I want St. Lucians to understand that, you know. But for one performing artist in a jazz festival for 2 hours, Andre, you can pay $100,000 for 2 hours of performance. Now, that is just to be on the stage, you know. We're not talking about the transportation, the courtesies, the accommodation, or anything like that.
And these people sometimes come with their entourage.
And they come with their whole entourage. So, I want St. Lucians to put that into perspective besides the job of the K9 unit. Because sometimes we just say, oh boy, that's just a dog. A dog eating rat poison. How did the rat poison get to be in the area? Andre, I have 4 dogs at my home. That's my security, my dogs. Okay? They are not trained by anybody. Once my wife came and she saw the door open and she took one of the dogs inside with her. And the next day when she came, as soon as she opened the door, the dog would go to every room in the house and then go back down. Make sure that there's nobody. Nobody trained the dog, just once she did that. And so these dogs, we know that we always say dog is a man's best friend because they are loyal, they are committed. I put poison out for rats at home, but I make sure I put it in an area where my dogs can never have access or never get exposed to it. So I want to go back and remind St. Lucians that the K9 unit was generating more revenue for St. Lucia than it was costing us. And I can tell you, I acted as Prime Minister on a couple of occasions. On 2 occasions, I signed direct awards. You know, they like my association with direct awards. I signed direct awards for 2 brand new 4-door Toyotas from Beachcomber for the police. You know where that money came from? The Attorney General's office, because everything that was confiscated by the government was used for the enhancement of the police force. So millions of dollars. The K9 unit was bringing in more than 10 times what it was costing the government of St. Lucia or the people of St. Lucia. In other words, every time there was a bust, whether it was of cash, because mostly of cash, because you can't reuse the drugs. You have to dispose of it. But there were large sums of cash that was always involved. And when you make the bust of the drugs and the persons are charged, they are fined. The money that is paid, where does it go to? It goes to the funds of the state. Anything that is confiscated, that is of value. So, for the Prime Minister, Philip J. Pierre, to say that the K9 unit was too costly, okay, they disbanded it. I've said it before. That facilitated a lot of the illegal firearms and drugs that have come through our ports in St. Lucia. I'm not talking about those that come through the illegal ports of entry or where there's no port of entry and somebody just comes in. You cannot control that in totality. So I will not say you could stop 100% of it. But everything that was coming could have been stopped at the port had our scanners been working and had we beefed up our K9 units. For that matter, it's not 4K, it's not 3 K9 or 1 Tyson we needed. We need about a dozen of these that people would know any and everywhere, because these dogs should not only be used at the airports, you know. When you stop in and you searching vehicles on the road and you're doing all of this, this is one of the best crime fighting tools that the police had within their control. And you tell me, after 2 years, without a K9 unit, we got a K9 unit, we got it operational, and it couldn't last a year. Now think of it, Andre, and I will remind St. Lucians. I made a statement that was not geared towards our doctors and our nurses about conversations that had taken place in certain corridors about some of us politicians and what can easily happen to us. So if that could happen to Tyson, you think our whole police force is corrupt? Our whole police force is not corrupt. There are very good police officers in St. Lucia. But there was somebody that could have been infiltrated, somebody who could have been influenced to facilitate something like this happening. We've heard of prisoners leaving the prison during the night, going and do what they have to do during the night, and report back to the prison before daybreak. This is St. Lucia.
You mean at Bodily?
Yes.
I thought that was the old prison that used to happen.
I thought that was the old prison. Andre, this is St. Lucia. And when other countries become suspect of us, so how you think with all of this going on with the EU, and remember, the Prime Minister knew that Martinique is part of Europe. Conveniently, when he wanted to make a particular statement, but he does not understand that drugs live in St. Lucia and firearms and crimes committed in Martinique is committed in Europe, according to him. And that the Europeans will act differently to these kinds of things, because once it's in Martinique, it's in Europe, because Martinique is part of France. So when we understand the implications of these things, and that the French is helping us in our crime fighting effort, you think the French didn't have use for their dog? You think they wanted to spend that money and know that the process of crime fighting in St. Lucia is being undermined through crooked persons within the same system who is supposed to protect us? So can I feel safe? Can you feel safe, Andre? Can the average St. Lucian feel safe if we are equipped with certain information that can have implications for certain people? This is much bigger than Tyson. This is much bigger than a member of the K9 unit. It says there is something fundamentally wrong in our system. And then we expect the police to investigate themselves. And we expect them to tell us what happened. And I've heard that the dog ingested rat poison. And for it to have, it would have had to eat a good amount of it. because the information that I got, the amount of internal bleeding there was before the dog passed on it is not by mistake it at all. So was the dog being starved? Was the dog so hungry? And remember, this is a dog that is in the possession and control of the police 24/7. Has anybody been brought in for questioning? Has anyone been... Because everything is happening behind closed doors. Can I have confidence in the commissioner of police? Because, first of all of these that happened should not have been broadcast. And Andre, how could all these rounds of ammunition come to St. Lucia with the firearms and nobody arrested? Now, I ship barrels from the U.S., I ship stuff from the U.S. Everybody who goes to a shipping agency must present the documentation and must fill out the form and sign the necessary documents. So there must be a point of origin. You can also trace back with law enforcement in the U.S. where these guns were purchased from. Who purchased it? Because while the gun laws are kind of free up in the U.S., for you to go and do certain things there, you have to present your ID. There must be a record that this is the person. Why you think when there is some terrorist activity in the U.S., they can trace back everything? So you telling me these 3,000 rounds of ammunition, the 17 firearms came to St. Lucia. It didn't originate from somewhere? Nobody paid for that barrel to arrive in St. Lucia or that container? No shipping agency that brought it in knew where it came from? Are we supposed to believe that, Andre? And are we going to be naive and blind about, oh, that doesn't affect me, that doesn't concern me? No. There is, you bring in anything on the port as an ordinary St. Lucian, they can trace it back to you. They can find out where it originated from. Who put this thing in your barrel? And again, Andre, remember what I said? So if nobody sent it, you remember I said when I travel, I don't put my bags for immigration. I only go with a carry-on. And when I get to the U.S., I buy clothes for me to wear. Because I have always been concerned about being set up. And when we say these things, it doesn't say that everybody in the system is corrupt, but it takes just one person. Just one person. So how could these barrels arrive in St. Lucia? You remember some time ago, a couple firearms, a lady went to collect the fridge and it was. What became of that, Andre? What have we heard about these things? And then you hear some high-ranking person was the one who came to get the lady out of the situation. Andre, our country has a level of corruption that is unprecedented. And then it puts all of us at risk, because I am baffled that all of this is happening. The Minister for Crime Prevention. So I guess the death of Tyson is not a crime. So we've not heard anything from the Crime Prevention Minister. We've not heard anything from the National Security Minister. We've not heard from the hierarchy of the police force. So was it expected that Tyson died, was buried, everything would have happened, and no St. Lucian would know that Tyson no longer exists?
Well, the police have issued a statement, and they've said that the post-mortem, this is where they're at right now.
But Andre, everything that happened...
But that report came from the ACP. But I remember when the drug bust and the bust of the arms and so on, it was the commissioner flanked by all high-ranking officials that came to a press conference But on this one, it seemed, to be so low-keyed, so downplayed, that is of concern to me.
But let me ask you something.
But
As an
Andre, the
opposition...
information was in the public domain before the police said anything.
That's right. Yeah.
So the police was reacting to what the public was saying rather than furnishing the public with information to avoid speculation.
But let me ask you, as an opposition party, and is that the case with all opposition parties across the globe, in terms of your influence over the police to get answers and so on, how effective, how strong is the opposition party when it comes to applying pressure, when it comes to those matters?
Well, in a democracy, we have a right to ask the questions, and we are asking the questions. But if the authorities, those that are in office right now and in positions right now, do not uphold or respect democracy, they simply tell you go to hell. And when you ask the question, so what can we do? We can only do as much as the general public wants, because if they are concerned enough, they know. It's just like when you, Andre, ask a question and the Prime Minister would say to you, that's not your business. We, the public, have to insist that, no, it is Andre's business, because Andre is asking that question on my behalf. Like I always say, many of you ask certain questions because you already have the information, you already know. But you ask the question on behalf of the public. And so in a democracy, they ought to be accountable. They ought to answer the questions. They have to report to the people. It is our duty. But when they neglect to do so, there's not much the opposition can do. The public, the citizens of the country can take a stand now. Civil society, the organizations who have lost their tongue and their voice box, can take a stand and force the government to. Otherwise, all we can do is wait till the next general election come, which is Judgment Day, where the general public, who seem to be scared and intimidated by their own government, can pass judgment and deal with the government then. But by right, it ought to be, because when I was part of a United Workers' Party government, so was Guy Joseph, and all kinds of questions were being asked. Everyone had a question to ask. All voices were firing on 10 cylinders at the time. You had all kinds of women's group, the churches. And I say the churches because I was sent to represent the United Workers' Party at a meeting, the government, at a meeting one time with the bishop, who had a problem with the fact that they said that we needed to consult more about the demolition of a building in Castries. Okay? Now, I'm not saying that complaining, That's the role of civil society, to challenge, to ask questions, and so on. National Trust. I don't think a month would go by if the National Trust didn't have some issue with a car butt or with a dolphin park or with something, building that's going to be demolished or anything like that. All of a sudden, they don't care anymore about those things. These things can happen. It doesn't matter to them. They don't want to know or anything like that. I mean, we have a bar association. You don't hear anything from them. You understand what I'm saying? Look at I spoke of the churches already, the women's groups, and all of those people. They have nothing to say. Civil society has nothing to say. People are afraid. Nowadays, I notice St. Lucia are taking a stand. And I must compliment the opposition for persisting, even when they were the lone voice, persisting on asking the questions and raising the challenges. Now I see St. Lucians taking a stand, and good for them. That is what obtains in a democracy, and that is what will put people in check. And Andre, if you're allowed to do whatever you want, today you'll move the cup here, tomorrow you'll throw it in my face, You understand what I'm saying? Because you go from bad to worse, Guys, you want to come in?
Yeah, if I may come in there, here's the other bigger concern, and I've received about 3 or 4 calls from persons, a couple from St. Lucia and a couple locally, saying to me, so if that could happen to Tyson in police custody, what about the implications of impacts and the allegations made on impacts? And because we're talking about the same entity, we're talking about, and unfortunately, I have a lot of police friends, Andre. It's not unfortunate, it's unfortunate that these people who are genuine, caring, good police officers who put their lives on the line every day to protect us is being labeled in the same category as those who are crooked and who would do anything. And that is the unfortunate situation, but I am sure that the police officers understand what the public's feelings and sentiments are about these things. Because if that was facilitated by police officers because of the effectiveness of Tyson in crime fighting, what makes the other allegations so far-fetched about what they would do to get rid of certain people that may become afraid? And you take the Beige situation as an example.
Yeah.
Who are the masterminds behind these things? Because it is obvious to me that it cannot be the police officers themselves who would engage in these activities that would be the kingpin, as we would say, behind these things. They are just the ones used to facilitate it. So who are they facilitating it for? And it brings me back to the statement made by Kenny Anthony when he said, who are the facilitators of crime? Businessmen, politicians. And I know among the politicians who facilitate crime, neither Spider nor myself fit in that category. I've never been associated with any such thing. And we have to ask ourselves these questions, because when we see the deviant behavior of people in this country and what is happening, and we see everything that is going on, and people want to pretend because it has not knocked on my door, it is not affecting me, but it is really affecting all of us. I am concerned about what the EU is doing now. And when the decision is made by the European Parliament, for you to go to Matnik, you will need a visa. Can you imagine falling sick? Maybe over the weekend, the embassy is closed. You need to get to Matnik in an emergency situation to save the life of a family member, a loved one, or yourself. And you cannot even do that because of the bad decisions that we have made as a country. And I don't care which government is in office, you know, Andre, whether it's UWP or SLP. Once a bad decision is made, it is the country that suffers as a result. And it is time that as St. Lucians we understand that it goes beyond flambeau and labor. It goes to the core of what affects us as a society, and whichever government that does it, if it's wrong, we need to be able to say it's wrong.
Now, I know we're not dog experts, but I have to ask a question. I would imagine that this dog was so well trained that even if it says that the dog were like really hungry, right, for example, would that dog, well, on its own volition, eat the rat poison?
That's
Would it do that?
And that's the thing. And
Even if it were hungry?
I have my doubts about that, Andre, because, like I said, ordinary dogs don't just eat any and everything, you know. And you're telling me, you know, and even then, I don't pretend to be any expert on dogs, but even then, that dog should be nowhere within the vicinity of being exposed to rat poison.
Exactly.
You know? And the hush that seemed to have followed its death.
Whoever was given charge of the dog definitely didn't do what he or she was supposed to do.
You know, Andre, as usual,
go as far as possible to protect the animal.
But as usual and as always, we carrying out an investigation. Now, Andre, you might follow up next month. Investigation is ongoing. It never comes to an end. We never get a report or anything like that. No heads will roll.
So let me put it in the language that all of us understand. Andre, you are driving on the road. Somebody jumps across the road and the vehicle hits them. You can be charged if the person dies, you can be charged for involuntary manslaughter because somebody died. You didn't do it deliberately. If somebody, because there's a handler for the dog, there's somebody in charge of this dog. Okay? So,
And no doubt who the dog trusts.
exactly. Think of a parent who is responsible for a child. You leave the child at home unattended, and something happens to that child. What happens to you as the parent, the guardian, or the caretaker of this child? How different is it for Tyson?
It's not different.
That the situation, because I want people to understand there should be no loose ends in this thing, because it is obvious that when you look at the situation, everybody who had access to this dog should have been brought in for questioning. How did it happen? And don't tell me it's just going to slide by, because if you give me to be in charge of a child, and during the time the child was under my care, something happened to that child where I became negligent, I did not carry out my duties, I did not protect the child. Because if the dog could protect itself, it wouldn't need handlers, you know. The dog would go home after every day's work like every other police officer. That is why there were trained handlers for these dogs, because they are part of your police unit. You telling me the police will just leave the guns anywhere by the side of the road, or just drop it anywhere where anybody who walks into the police station can pick up a firearm? If that happens, when you have a firearm in your possession, Andre, if it is misplaced, it is stolen, and you are held accountable, you know. So you telling me that, so the police doesn't know that, the commissioner doesn't know that, the ACPs don't know what has happened. So they really think that all of us in St. Lucians are fools, that they can just come and give us a cock and bull story and we will accept it, we will buy it, the rest of St. Lucia can. The opposition has a responsibility towards the people of this country to cry out against these things. And you ask a pertinent question. Oppositions are not highly valued. Whether you have 8 out of the 9 of the 17 seats, once you're in opposition, the government controls everything. But the population, we have a responsibility as opposition. That is why they are called Her Majesty's loyal opposition. So as much as the government has a say, the opposition has a right to ask questions. And the commissioner should not only be meeting with the Prime Minister and briefing the Prime Minister, the opposition has a right to know what is happening in this country, because all of us are at risk. Everybody who dies. I mean, 2 weeks ago, Andre, we had 2 funerals in Castries Southeast. 3 young men shot right in the balcony. I've been to the family and you can see the bullet marks right on the wall. The people, and the house is not on the main road to say you pass on the main road, you know. The vehicle was parked away from the main road. The people walked up to the house, shoot, and left. Where are these guns coming from? How? I mean, one time a gentleman said it's easier to get bullets than bread, and I was wondering what he was talking about. It was when these 3,000 rounds of ammunition came in so easily, but fortunately Tyson was able to intercept it. And don't we think there's any connection with the demise of Tyson and this buzz that has happened? So why is it that the police, customs, cannot trace where these things came from? Andre, I ordered a vehicle when I was a minister of government from Japan When the vehicle came here, Customs started an investigation and they said to me, we got information from Japan that you under-invoiced the vehicle. I said, I under-invoiced the vehicle. He said, but how is that possible? I said, but as a minister, I'm entitled to get the vehicle duty-free. So if I had to do anything with the vehicle, I would over-invoice it so that I get a higher value. He tell me, oh, you're not supposed to say that. I said, because that just tells me how ridiculous what you all are saying, that I would under-invoice the vehicle. Fortunately for me, Andre, I had the WhatsApp messages of all communication with the supplier of the vehicle on the price from 6 months before. And every conversation that we had. So I said to 6 customs officers brought me in one time to question about a vehicle that I was getting as a minister duty free. And when I came in, you know what the officer said to me? Oh, they got a call from the person who exported the vehicle to me, and he said that he under-invoiced the vehicle for me. I said, the exporter told you he under-invoiced and he's still exporting vehicles to St. Lucia, so you think if he under-invoices for me alone, he under-invoiced, he didn't and you all didn't block him as an exporter? Now all before that, I didn't show them my information, because I'm stringing them along to see where they go. Eventually, when I showed them the information, they said, well, the information we have corroborates with the information you give us. I said, but that's not what you told me a while ago. But they didn't know that I had the information. And that is what I tell people in St. Lucia. I know when we are targets, Andre. I know when people come after us because you speak your mind, you stand for what you believe is right as a person. Then people, your opponents label you, they brand you, and they come after you, and they use people within the system of government to come after you. That is what happens, Andre. So if I could not provide that information, you know what they would have said?
A scandal.
Yeah, you under-invoice a vehicle. And indeed, and in fact, there was no reason to, because you had a vehicle for the value of $100,000, you could get it duty-free. The vehicle cost about $30,000 US, which is just about 80,000 EC. So, but that was done within 2 weeks of my vehicle arriving in St. Lucia, The vehicle arrived in December. I cleared the vehicle in late December, just before Christmas. And first week in January, I was brought in by Customs. Today, Customs cannot find out where these things came from in the U.S., which agency shipped the barrel, how did the barrel arrive, who signed the document with the shipping agency.
So, Mr. Joseph, you just left that after you were cleared of all the allegations or accusations. You just left it at that?
But what else can you do, Andre?
Weren't you in government at the time?
Yes.
Well, you see, Andre, you expect people to uphold the principles of whatever office that they carry. And
yeah, but how Mr. Joseph is saying, apparently somebody, right, decided to use somebody else to, get at him.
Yes.
And he said, had it not been for the information that he had to clear the situation, right?
Yeah, well,
God knows how far this would have gone.
All he can do is what he's doing now, make it public.
So what I did, because I spoke to the customs officers and I tell them, why do you all continue to go on this witch hunt after people? You all do this, you all do that. Now, imagine I was in government as a minister. So when I tell people, the last time I made a statement, I say, I don't ship anything on my name. I don't export anything. I don't do it, Andre, because I know there are people who are out to get me. And it's not because I do things that are illegal that I am hiding anything. I just take the precautionary measures that are necessary. Andre, there was a time, every time I traveled to the US, I was in opposition at the time. I would be pulled up. I would be brought into a room, questioned. Eventually, and every time they would tell me, okay, you're free to go. Not knowing that all the time the then government of the Labour Party had made some report about me. And the fellas went inside and declared my name on the system. I never knew that was happening. I'll travel with my wife. I've never gone to the US without my wife. The two of us, my wife passed free. Guys called it. And I'm wondering, why are these things happening? Only to find out that somebody had made some report from St. Lucia, and it came from people in government. So the system that we are operating under is a dangerous system. People try to get you through every means. Everything I have done have been under scrutiny in this country, you know. Everything.
That's why I asked you if there was no follow-up. Because if there was no follow-up, that means the same system that still exists today. So when you win the next election...
let me tell you what the follow-up is, Andre. Because customs has a certain authority. So customs tell you, okay, we suspect this, they have a right to investigate it. Then they are satisfied that there's nothing, they release. What can you do? You're going to take customs to court for being suspect of you, and it's not going to go anywhere, Andre. So I don't even waste my time to fight this.
Not even if you're in government, you could
I was in government.
But first thing St. Lucians will say is that he thinks he's above the law and everybody is subject to the law. So if they feel there's something suspicious about any one of us, they can investigate. But at the end of the day, when it begins to look like you're being targeted, what he can do is what he's doing there right now, speak out against it. It is for the rest of us now to realize that that is unjust, that is not right. And not because it is not me that I don't say anything, that we all speak out against it. Because you see, we all have a role to play. And in older societies, Andre, there's very little intervention and involvement of law officers and police and everything. The society, through their norms and so on, through societal pressure, maintain certain standards, you know, because if you did certain things, the whole society will condemn you, will be looked upon in a certain way and so on. We have the reverse of that now. The drug dealers in our communities who walk around in big chains and buying out bars and driving fancy cars and so on, you know the name for them? Bossman. Okay? They are revered. They are held on a pedestal. Young people aspire to be like them and so on. It's a total reversal. And the rest of us who know better keep quiet. We are in fact tacitly facilitating and abetting that kind of thing in our society. So that is why I'm saying, even when it does not affect me personally, let us speak out. Don't wait till it happens to you, because by the time it happens to you, there'll be nobody to speak out. You understand? And that is what the government has done. They have been able to target individuals, attack them, intimidate them, and so on. Beat them into submission. So the rest of us will be afraid to stand up and talk. No. While they're doing that to that person, you see it is wrong, you come out and you speak out against it, so they know that none of us is alone. And they cannot, because it is just an individual, an isolated case, succeed in doing what they're doing. You know, I mean, yeah, go ahead, guys.
Yeah, let me give you just one very short example, Andre, of how bad it can get for us as a country. I say we've lost most of our sense of our humanity as a country. And I say us because anything that's labeled in St. Lucia includes all of us, not because we are participants. When my mom fell sick, emergency, my mother was not sick for one day in her life as long as I knew her for her 89 years. She may have a headache, lie down, but to say ever went to the hospital, never knew that. My mom fell sick. She said, my sister called, she said, we need to take her to the hospital. She would always tell you, my hospital. On that occasion, she said, we got to the hospital, and there was no wheelchair to bring her inside. I was there waiting and waiting. So I picked her up in my arms and I was carrying her inside. A gentleman came. I don't even know the gentleman. If I see him today, I cannot identify. He came with an old wheelchair that had nothing to rest my mother's foot on. So I held up one leg, my sister held up the other leg while he was pushing in the wheelchair. Do you know the man was scolded for bringing my mother into the hospital?
You're kidding me.
And then even a meeting was called to deal with this matter at the hospital, you know. And my mom died within 10 to 15 minutes of arriving at the hospital. So
You saying the gentleman who brought a wheelchair?
yes.
A wheelchair probably damaged.
Because it's Guy Joseph. I wasn't in government, you know.
And Andre, obviously it was an emergency. You heard what Guy said. She died about 15 minutes.
Within 15 minutes, they couldn't.
yeah.
They would
So
not even give her the death certificate without a post-mortem because they said she did not spend long enough at the hospital. Fortunately, Dr. Andre Matthews, who was a private doctor, I would make sure she do her regular visits. So he was able, because he had just seen her 2 weeks before. And I'm saying this to make a point to St. Lucia.
No, hold on, Mr. Joe. You're saying an employee at the hospital,
Yes.
right, brought your mom a wheelchair, some damaged wheelchair, apparently. And you say he was scolded
Yes.
for doing that?
For doing that.
That's how far the politics have gone with some.
So
in this country.
Andre, when I make certain statements, and people, I don't make statements just out of the blue. I don't rejoice over these things.
And by the way, that's recently, right? That happened?
Yeah, less than 2 years ago. And I have never given the details of what happened to my mom, but she had a problem breathing. And then she reached at the hospital, and the simplest thing that could have done was to give her some aided oxygen. And when I saw they were not, first thing they tell me, go and pay your $20. After they said that people 80 years and over, medical is free, I said to the person, you really think I can go and pay $20 there for my mother? The lady is dying and y'all will not attend to her. And it went back and forth. Eventually, when they called, when I went outside 15 minutes, they said 2 members of the family come inside. And you know what they told us? We're trying to resuscitate her. And my only comment was, when y'all could have done something, y'all didn't. And when I went inside, my mom's stomach, her belly was bigger than somebody who was 9 months pregnant. And when she went in there, she was nothing like that. Because honestly, they pumped her and tried to get to resuscitate her. I don't blame doctors and nurses on these things. Nobody has control over life and death to the extent that we think that they do. But what baffled me was the reaction of people towards, when my mother came in, there were a couple ladies who were there waiting. Yodi, oh, c'est Guy Joseph, hot kayata de pou li avan nou ki hala pou komet. When they heard my sister scream, because none of us expected that, it's when they realized how serious the situation was. And I met the gentleman once afterwards, and he told me, boy, you know, I got into trouble for bringing your mother inside the hospital. That is where we are as a country. And when you see people tell you the politics is dirty, and the politics is not necessarily dirty by the politicians themselves, you know. It's people who believe they are more than the politicians. Because there are things, any of the ministers in government, including the present Prime Minister, Philip J. Pierre, would see me arrive there with my mother, and he would do whatever he could to make sure he assists. So this is not a problem of the politicians themselves. I would meet Dr. Kenny and any of the members there. They would interact with me at a different level. Because we have that level of respect. We may disagree on a lot of things, but we would not treat each other in situations like that in a particular way. But some of the people of the country take it beyond what the politicians themselves would do, and they think they are doing something to praise the politician. You know, one time when Mangal was running against me, I was coming up the road and a lady was cursing and getting on behalf of Mangal. And I stopped by her and I said, how many times have I told you all, do not curse on me and do not get on with other people about politicians. I say, if you fall there and I fall there now, Mangal will pick me up before he picks you up, because he knows me more than he knows you. So don't make a fool out of yourself. for the sake of politicians. And that is a message that needs to get out there to the average St. Lucian. We can define our political views. We can have a different outlook. We can support a person, but we must never lose sight of our humanity and the fact that we are St. Lucians first.
You know, Andre, I just, not to belabor the point, but I just want to add to what Guy says there. In the elections of, was it 2001 or 2006, during the campaign I had an accident. My son was on board, my brother's son was on board, my nephew, and so on. We ended up having to go to the hospital. I was not injured, but the two kids were. I was the driver. I say to people, I mean that literally. The first call I got for concern on everything else from Mario Michel. I will always repeat that, And I got follow-up calls to find out. He knew I was okay. I got follow-up calls from him to find out how the kids were doing. When I say kids, they were young at the time, because I'd come from picking them up from St. Mary's College. My nephew and my son, And I'm just saying so to reinforce what Guy is saying in terms of, the way people behave sometimes and so on. Now, the guy talked about his mother. 3 weeks ago, my brother suffered a massive stroke. And he spent days in the corridor of OKU.
So that's still happening?
It happened 3 weeks ago. And so, my brother is what you can call a heavyweight. I mean, I'm small by my brother. My brother is about my height, but maybe twice my size in terms of, Now, if someone suffers a stroke, Andre, parts of their body become paralyzed. So you're talking about dead weight. Because you can probably lift Guy as he is there right now, or you lift me as I am there right now. If I'm dead, you can lift me. Because I'm a lot heavier because it's, on my weight. So there's this little nurse. There's no way she could shift my brother, let alone roll him over. So we had to assist. So, and it's in the hallway, no privacy, nothing, you understand. So I went to the supermarket in Cul-de-sac, the Massey store in Cul-de-sac, to get Pampers and so on for my brother, and to come back. And the security wouldn't let me in. And it was clear, I was explaining to him, I know it is not visiting hours, but my brother was brought there, he's in the hallway and so on. And besides, the nurse herself will need help in, And it was another security came and said, allow the gentleman in and whatever and things. And the nurses didn't have a problem with me coming in there because they were happy for the assistance they were getting and so on, because it's his son and I who had to lift him and do all kind of things like that. And I'm just saying, because he didn't say it to me, but it was evident, it was clear to me that was political on his part. You understand what I'm saying? And I say to myself, boy, the extent to which people go because of politics and so on. And that is why some people are afraid to speak. That is why some people are afraid to declare themselves as the right people. But I've never been afraid to declare who I am, where I stand, and so on. And you see, at the end of the day, I think we have to respect each other's right to be where they are, support who they want to support, what party they want to support, and to be able to say so without evoking the kind of response and reaction that we get from one another. Because just like I have a right, Andre, so do you. We have to understand that we can differ on certain things, but at the same time respect each other. And I think that was the point. But Guy, I just want, because before we open the lines, Andre, I just want to bring another point that stems from what we're talking about. At least the opposition, at least the general public, and some members of the media have spoken about Tyson's death, at least. Mm-hmm. Never mind our government has had nothing to say, perhaps because they do not care, I do not know. But Guy, when I was growing up, one person in Grosile would die. Anybody you meet in Grosile, before they say good morning or hello, man, you hear Mr. So-and-so die? Man, you hear Mazel so-and-so die? Natural death, I'm talking about. Not even an accident or anything, normal natural death. Mm-hmm. And some of those people who have been sick from so long and so on, but it's a subject of discussion. Now, I'm living in the same St. Lucia. In a few days, over a weekend and a day or so, 5 people are being murdered. Not just that, young people. in their prime, including a boy who graduated on Thursday last week from secondary school. I don't know if you're appreciating what I'm saying here, you know. And I'm speaking to people. Now I must confess, Andre, not even me, that's not going to be the first thing I'm going to say to you. But eventually it came up, and I'm saying so, everybody knew of it. Nobody spoke of it. And what does that say about us as a people, as a country? We have a government where people are being paid to perform certain functions and have certain responsibilities. We have a national security minister. We have a crime prevention minister. We have a commissioner of police.
Home Affairs.
We have a home affairs minister.
And
we have an attorney general. You know, up to now, I'm speaking to you, Andre, I've not heard a word from any of them. Okay? And not to mention you have the government loudmouth, biggest mouthpiece, Richard Frederick. Up to who quickly comes and talk about how much gains they have made because they're doing better than last year and all that kind of thing. Not a word from any of them. Like Rick would say, not a word, not a word, not a word. And like I like to say, not a peep from anybody, including the Minister of National Security. You know? I mean, so what does that say about us? Andre, we have to be very careful in that we do not allow atrocities, all kinds of abnormalities, heinous situations to become normal in our society. And that is what we are doing, you know.
You know, the situation is very, very serious as far as crime and our sense of humanity. And that is what St. Lucia was known for, the friendliness, the kindness of its people. And to an extent that still exists. The care that we looked out for each other. And when everybody is well and about their business, people didn't pay much attention to you. But if there was sickness, but it's as if we've become so accustomed to that. It's just another person. So what's the big deal? And that is the sad part of where St. Lucia is finding itself today. And as you indicated, Spider, people have become so indifferent to the fact that, boy, another person has been murdered. And we keep on hearing about my disappointment with our police force is to come and talk or almost be boasting about a reduction in crime. A reduction in crime measured against what? Last year?
It was a record. Record
year. You see, Andre, here's the problem that I have with, and the police should have known. Every single occasion the police says that there is a reduction in crime, there is something to remind us that crime is alive and well in St. Lucia. The previous time they said that, we had 2 murders. This time they said it, we had 3. Now, these are reported murders.
Was it 4?
It was 5. There were 3 over the weekend, and by Monday or Tuesday, by Monday or so, we had another 2. I heard rumors that there was one in Sufra yesterday. I don't know how true it is, because, Andre, I'm hearing it from unofficial sources. And that's the problem. We don't hear from our government officials. We don't hear from the police officially. We don't hear from the media, Andre. Now, I'm attacking you all here.
And let me add the opposition as well.
We don't hear from us?
No, what I'm saying, for example, when these things happen, and rightly so, you're saying government officials should say something. Yeah. But I'm saying, what about the leader of the opposition?
We are the only ones who are saying something.
No, I'm saying you're saying
Andre,
something now.
Let me tell you. No. Let me.
Why was there some official statement from the opposition leader?
We have the information.
Let me say to you, the problem we have is the reporting of crime.
Yeah, exactly.
Not just, the crime is a problem, but the non-reporting of crime. Remember, the Prime Minister said that they should not be reporting all these criminal activities. It's making the country look bad. Words to that effect.
And that the opposition is glorifying crime and praying for crime and so on because we speak about it.
No, I'm talking about the condemnation of the 4 or 5 homicides on the weekend. I'm saying and you're right, the government should say something.
Right.
But I'm saying the opposition as well, in the person of the opposition leader, should condemn it. Whether or not the government does it, he should be very careful to do that.
Let's not put too much pressure on the opposition leader. The opposition leader put in place spokesperson, and the party has an organization called press briefings, and those spokespeople go out and speak on behalf of the party. So, the party is, as far as I'm concerned, has played their role as far as that is concerned. That's the only official organization or institution that you have heard from on the issue of what has happened in the last week.
Andre, there used to be a record keeping of the number of murders. If you check,
I don't like how you brought that up. Andre is in the media. I should ask him how many people have been killed for this year. But go ahead and make your point.
I would put Andre. I know Andre in media too long for me to ask Andre that question. But the point I'm making, Andre, is this. When we get to the point where we cannot even go to a reliable source for stats on what is happening. So when the police tell me we have a reduction in crime, I can't believe the police. You know why I cannot believe them? Because what are the official figures? When was the last statement made that over the last 4 years, we've had X number of murders in St. Lucia, which average X amount per year, and when I compare year to date, I have seen a reduction of 25. I don't know. What are you measuring against last year? So if you had an unprecedented year, and that's how government gives out stats. That's why stats are bad. So you destroy the economy. The economy gets to the point where it is performing below zero. No growth. And all of a sudden, you have 2% growth. But when you inherited the economy before that, you had 10% growth. You brought it down to zero, and now you increase it by 2 and you boasting that, well, we've done 2. So where's the other 8 that was there before that we've lost? So we talk about crime. We talk about the reduction. I know for a fact that the stats that we are receiving, they are not accurate. Let me tell you why. If you got injured and 2 weeks later you die in the hospital from the injury, they were not counting it as part of the murders. Okay? It's almost as if you died of natural causes.
Right.
So how do we know that we can trust the information?
And guy, they find bodies like in the bushes, on the side of the road and so on. And of course, nobody witnessed anything. They do not count them as homicides. Like I remember last year, there was a body found in Marishill. Okay, they carried out post-mortem and then we never heard anything about that. That body was not counted as a homicide. Now this year I had an argument with a retired police officer, and I told him the last figure that I heard from the media. That's some time ago. Of late I've not been hearing any figures. He told me I'm wrong. I said, but how am I wrong? He counted for me a figure that was higher and gave me every incident. In most cases, names. 1 or 2, he said, well, the guy who was shot in Grosse Ile on Friday night and whatever, he probably didn't have a name, but most of them, 90%, he had names for them, and he gave me every instant, what date and everything that happened, just because he has been keeping abreast with it and so on. And it may be that there are cases that he never heard of, because I'm hearing there was a killing in Soufrière yesterday, there was one in Dennery the night before and so on, but that's not been confirmed. Now, am I to repeat that, Because we're being told about 30 if you go for the official thing, but it's more like 40 from what I know.
So Andre, the question I would like to ask our police and our government, what is the acceptable number of deaths for St. Lucia? Murders.
Acceptable?
Yes. Because for you to tell me there's a reduction, or there's this or there's that, which means that there must be a baseline we are working with. Isn't that so? If I am perfect, because, and I'm challenging the thinking of St. Lucians by the statement I'm making here, Andre. What is acceptable? What is permissible? Anytime you go beyond what is permissible, then you've gone overboard. So for you to tell me, okay, there is a reduction put it in context. Put it in the context of, okay, last year was a record year for St. Lucia. We had 80 murders. This year,
75 days, tell you, Ben.
this year we are on track to be less than 80. Does that make it acceptable? So is that how the police measures their success? Or is it that we need to bring murder rates to below double digits?
Well, I'll tell you something.
For population.
I'll tell you something. Tomorrow there's a program called Meet the Minister. If Andre asks them that question here tomorrow, I can tell you what they'll say to Andre. Well, Andre, every murder is one too many. That's the foolishness they'll tell you. But we have record numbers and they have nothing to say about it.
But
you know?
I agree that every murder is one too many, you know. And that is why I'm saying law enforcement should not, yes, law enforcement needs to keep their stats so they can measure how they are performing and what they are doing. But when you come and present that, why is it presented to the public? Are you saying to the public that you are satisfied that the police is being successful?
You're asking rhetorical questions, but they have answers, you know. They're doing it to make the government look good. That's what they're doing.
But it cannot be, because it's not the government committing murder. I don't want to believe that the government is sending anybody out there to commit any murder. So it cannot be that, because conveniently we always say don't politicize crime. When the opposition speaks about crime, don't politicize it. But when the police now will come and report to the country that the murder rate has reduced by what percentage they said, and tomorrow why are they saying it's been reduced? To make the government look good, as you say.
You'll finish BPN next day, you'll hear Richard Frederick the next day, you'll hear all of them talk about, we don't...
I remember there was a period, how many days had gone by and there was no murder, and the Prime Minister actually reported on the number of days that we went through in the year, and there was not a murder.
Okay, have you heard him on the number of murders that we have had in the last few days?
So you see my problem with this, Andre, and I hope that our listeners are understanding. This is not just about politics. This is about where we are psychologically, what our thinking and our reasoning is. So we had 80 murders last year, and because we had it, and I'm just using a figure, Andre, because I really don't know what the numbers are. If we had 80 murders last year, and this year we have 75, so we have a reduction of 16 fives is 80. So what percentage? So we have a 5% or 3% decline. Is that acceptable? Is that what we are saying? Because I want to understand, when a statement is made, there is a reason. There is a reason why people sit and calculate what they do and come and report. So there's a reduction in road traffic accidents. There's a reduction in burglaries. There's a reduction in murder. To say what? So that is why I am saying, but Tyson gets its demise in the custody of the police. We've heard other people in the custody of the police lose their lives, and no report has been given. You think a report will be given about Tyson? You really think the people in police custody who have died, people in police custody who have escaped? I heard about the Jamaican who was in police custody, escaped, was able to leave the island. How are these things possible? And how many times have anyone been held accountable?
Well, that was the question I was going to ask. And Guy, to what extent there is any outrage on our part as the public when these things happen? So it is normal. It is normal to have 5 deaths over a weekend. It is normal. I mean, never mind, we know that we had a situation where we had about 4 murders in a day in St. Lucia. But never mind, we know that we had a curfew imposed upon people in Vieux Fort by criminals and so on. And even while we brought outside help and so on, there are still murders taking place. and things have gone out of control, and you mustn't say it. If you say it, it's because you're politicizing crime and so on. Well, if crime has to be politicized for it to stop, let it be. At the end of the day, what the government is doing is making everything partisan, and that is where the problem lies. Because when the United Workers' Party offered recommendations to the government, he publicly said, the Prime Minister that is, that he threw it in the bin. Okay? Whereas you don't have the answer. We are making suggestions and you throw it in the bin. Whatever measures we implemented, they have reversed it, like the dismantling of the K9 unit.
I want to believe that once politicians are in charge of crime fighting, putting policies in place, crime will be always a political issue. And I don't pretend that it's not a... Who is in charge? The Prime Minister. Who is he? A politician. He is the Minister for National Security. Who is the Minister for Crime Prevention? An elected member of Parliament. So how can the discussion around crime not be political when the key players, and I'm not talking about the law enforcement aspect, who chooses the commissioner of police? Who is in charge? Who is involved in the promotion of police officers?
Guy, I heard
90% of that is influenced by the politics, and yet still when we speak about the political aspect of it, people want to come around and tell you, oh, don't make it political. How can it not be political?
I heard the former commissioner of police, Daisy, pleading publicly, okay, for the return of the K9 unit. He was the commissioner, but you know, Andre, that was a decision for the government. The politicians had to make that decision. And at the time, the politicians like Philip J. Pierre, Ernest Hille, and Richard Frederick, because they are the ones I heard say it, felt it was too expensive to have the K9 unit.
So what caused the change of heart on that particular matter? Because if it was too expensive, why is it now we have Tyson?
Well,
and the policy seems to have changed.
Public and diplomatic pressure. Diplomatic pressure will come when I'm talking about the French. Okay, because don't think the French are not affected by our government's lackadaisical, laid-back, laissez-faire attitude towards crime. So that is what caused it.
So, Andre, the pertinent question is, when UWP was in government, and they tell us don't make it, when UWP was in government, the Prime Minister came and publicly stated that the K9 unit was costing $40,000 a month to operate. Andre, as a media person, do you know what the present K9 unit is costing a month?
Probably twice as much. Because how many? They have two, right?
Yeah.
Mm.
But I don't know. But how many of us know? Okay. So the Prime Minister felt it necessary to come and say that the Alan Chasney-led administration, because what the Prime Minister did not say, because I don't only listen to what people say, you know, I listen to what is implied in what they say, that we were wasting $40,000 on a K9 unit. In essence, because...
And by the way, how many were there at that time?
I think we had 3 of them.
I think so, yeah.
Okay, and how many now?
2.
Two.
But one that was operational. Well, I know we had 3 handlers. Let me not say, I'm not sure how many.
Well, I know there's another one.
So
when you translate the name from French to English, the name is gangster. I don't know French.
Maybe that one will survive.
So let me ask you, so the 3, is it the 3 that was costing the $40,000 a month, or for one?
No, whatever the K9 unit.
Yeah.
I know they had 3 handlers. I cannot tell you that they had 3 dogs. But there were 3 handlers. Maybe there were 3 dogs. I don't know. But because I never got involved in that aspect. I knew the police was equipped with what they requested in order to deal with it. But I'm going to the more fundamental issue. If a Prime Minister can say that is too much money to spend, you know, Andre, they spend more money in investigating me than they were willing to spend on the K9 unit. Because I'm giving you the figures, Andre. 480,000 by 5. 5 fours is 20. That's 2 million. 5 it's 40. That's $2.4 million. Huh? For the 5 years they would spend on the K9 unit. They spend over $1 million
Yeah, but
US.
and still spending because they have contracted.
And
Lindquist.
they contracted Lindquist, and they still have a special prosecutor
And they have a special prosecutor.
to investigate me alone.
You know?
Okay? Now, Philip J. Pierre keep on saying it's not Guy Joseph. He was investigating it. I brought the papers in cabinet, in parliament.
So who was he investigating?
I don't know. He said everybody.
Which one of the guy?
He said everybody. But I'm just saying this. So you could find justifiable reasons to pay Robert Lindquist $800 an hour to investigate Guy Joseph. Pay his passage to come to St. Lucia, his hotel accommodation, the taxi he took from where he is living in the US to get to the airport. Every single thing is paid. And every receipt and every bill that was paid is on the government system.
And up to now, I've not heard a word from that report, Andre, which I paid for.
In Treasury, Andre.
Yeah.
You could spend over $2.7 million to go after one politician that you think you need to get rid of in the politics. But a K9 unit that was generating millions of dollars, intercepting major criminal activity, ammunition, money, drugs. That was too much to spend on them in your 5-year term in government.
If I can interrupt you, Andre, we have not opened the line. So if, at least let's give our listeners and viewers the next 10 minutes. If we can.
Okay. So you have a call, by the way.
We have a call, okay.
Hello?
Yes, hello?
Hello?
Yes, welcome to Meet the Opposition. Good morning.
Good morning, gentlemen.
Yeah, go ahead and make a contribution, please.
Where will I start? Okay, I need to find out the role of the opposition, especially, the leader of the opposition. With Tyson death, it was said by the police was suspected. It's very suspicious, so they had to investigate it. And we know now, is the police themselves that have to do that investigation. With all the circumstances and everything that has happened, we also had the French ambassador saying that 10 years ago it did happen. Does the opposition leader can put a word, or actually, I won't say influence, but demand that we can have an outside source, okay, to help with that investigation?
Well, he can call her, but at the end of the day, he can make the call, he can ask the question, but it is up to the government who are in office today to take the decision. I do not know that it will go anywhere because that is not a concern of the government. The government is not interested, they do not care. You have not heard a word from any of them.
But at what point in time that we can actually, including the opposition, that we can put our foot down to demand answers?
Okay.
We have the French ambassador there, and you're telling me there is no way that the leaders the opposition leader can go in to have a conversation with the French ambassador. The same way they were able to give us donators to give us a dog, they cannot say, well, okay, you know what? We're gonna help you all with that investigation.
Okay, I have the deputy political leader of the WP here, and I'll let him answer you. But it's interesting that you're not talking about the government that is sitting in office today, that is actually directly responsible for crime fighting and the security of this country. But you're asking that of the opposition. But the opposition, let him answer.
So caller, but you asked the question. So give me a chance to respond to you, because here's where we are. Our system of governance is controlled by the Prime Minister and the government of the day. The most the leader of the opposition can do is make a request. It does not have to be honored or respected. It is time that St. Lucia understands that we elected a government, not a leader of the opposition. Nobody elects a leader of the opposition. People elect a government. Nobody went and voted for Alan Chasney to be leader of the opposition. People voted for Philip J. Pierre to be prime minister. And it is time we stop passing the buck from the Prime Minister to the leader of the opposition, as if Alan Chastanet is still Prime Minister of St. Lucia. Alan Chastanet is not Prime Minister. He can represent the voice of the opposition, but the reins of government is under the control of Philip J. Pierre. And it is time that the people of St. Lucia, we the people, as the opposition is doing, demands answers from the elected government of the day, who have the full control of the reins of power in this country.
And owe it to us to provide us with answers.
All right. Okay, so if that's the case, then we're finished.
We're not finished. We're not finished. Do the right thing, because you realize they're not performing their role, they're not carrying out their responsibility. When the time comes, do the right thing. And when the opposition raises the questions that they raise, provide the support to the opposition as the general public to put pressure on the government. Because we have no actual mechanism to do so other than the power of the people. So you have to stand behind the opposition when they ask the question, and they demand and insist that the questions be answered. And in the meantime, if they still do not answer it, you know what to do when election comes.
Unfortunately, this will have to be a final caller, unfortunately.
Yes. Okay. Hello, good day. Go ahead, please.
A pleasant good morning to you, Mr. Guy Joseph.
Good morning.
Mr. Spider and Andre Paul.
Morning.
Pleasant morning to you, PW on the line. You know, I listened to Mr. Guy Joseph, and one of the interesting things he said is that a lot of crime happens in this country that has not been reported. And I certainly agree with him, because just about 2 months ago, I have some friends that are Peace Corps volunteers, and they were robbed somewhere along the Caribbean Cinema area, that shock area that they were robbed. And the police came to make a statement, and take the statement from them. And since then, they haven't heard from the police. A lot of tourists that I actually transport have actually told me that they've been robbed, their apartment have been broken and enter, and you hear very little from the government when it comes to crime against tourists. They have numbers about homicide, they have numbers about burglary, they have numbers about, but when it comes to the numbers about visitors that have been robbed, or crime against visitors, we actually, which is not forthcoming from the government. And the government need to take a stand when it comes to crime against tourists. I mean, visitors are here just for a week to 2 weeks, and when they go back home, the investigating police officer totally forgets about the crime. That's the impression we're getting, because the guest houses owners, the proprietors of these various establishments don't hear from the police officers. So a lot of crime here is unreported, and the police need to do something about it. The other thing I want to mention is when it comes to the caretaking of these dogs. I mean, there are special people that are assigned to take care of these dogs, and the police should know who was responsible for the dogs on a particular day, and also, I believe a bounty was placed on the dog head. And the police need to know whether it's from the corporate society, whether our business people are placing these bounties, or criminals are placing these bounties on these dogs' head, and we need to get to the bottom of this. I'd like to hear from the minister, what is he going to do if when the United Workers' Party comes into office, when it comes to the K9 unit.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, caller. We don't have much time, but if you can give a quick, short response, I'll be happy.
We will do what we had done before. We will fully establish a K9 unit. You would have the proper handlers in place, and you would know at all times who is responsible for the K9 unit, because the documents were well kept. Everybody was signing who is taking over, who is doing this, who is in charge at what point in time. It was run. This is not something new, and we can't pretend that because the Tyson met its demise through questionable means at this point in time that the police doesn't know what is happening. I believe that there are people in there who are fully aware of what has happened. They may choose not to tell us, but I will not be fooled by the fact that they don't know what has happened.
Yeah, and of course, in addition to that, let's not forget that the United Workers' Party ensured that the forensic lab was fully operational and that they can perform their role. A role has to be played by the forensic lab now in testing, doing the toxicity in terms of what happened to the dog, since they said it was poison. Anyway, it's unfortunate that the time has run out on us, because we had a very interesting discussion on a subject that is being avoided by those who ought to discuss the matter. But you heard us on Meet the Opposition. And so today I'm happy that we had Mr. Guy Joseph here with us. Thank you. You have a wealth of information. You'll have to come back, Guy, because it's always a pleasure.
Can I say one thing before we close, Andre?
Yeah.
Sure. Mm-hmm.
Andre, I didn't want to put your program on the spot, so I refrain from saying certain things. But I will say this much for when we have our Sunday Live coming up. It is in my mind, it is no coincidence that Tyson met its demise on the eve of the presidential visit by the Nigerian ambassador.
Nigerian president.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And if you see the comments I have a list of comments from people in Nigeria that have posted on social media their own perception and their own views. But I don't want to put you on the spot, Andre, so I stayed away from this. But trust me, on Sunday Live, I will give my view of what I believe, because I don't see it's just coincidental that when you have a major visit like this, that you have your bomb squad, you have your K9 unit, you have because you need to know that the environment you bring in the president in is a safe environment. And I don't believe it's just a coincidence. You can just check with law enforcement in any part of the world. I have visited countries with head of state like Alan Shasney, Stevenson King, Sir John, during his short stint that I worked with him. And I know the protocols that are in place. I've seen it. So I understand certain things. So I am saying this so that St. Lucian's eyes and minds can be open to what may be beyond our eyes to see today.
Yes, okay, so thank you very much, Guy. Like I said, you just proved my point. There's so much more to be said. I will have to bring you back at some point. Andre, thank you very much. Thank you to all of our listeners and viewers. Thanks to those who called in and made the contribution. You can join us on Sunday for United Workers' Party Sunday Live. You can join me on Monday.
And where is that, by the way?
That will be in Meekwood South.
Yeah.
Meekwood South, yeah. And you can join me on Monday for Like It Is. Stay tuned to the United Workers' Party, where we shed the light on the truth. We provide you with information of concern and interest to you. Thanks again. Have a good day.
Sorry, when you say live, I don't follow.
Well, it is like a town hall meeting.
Oh, okay.
But it's been
it's broadcast live.
It's been streamed live. Yeah,
I see.
On television and on social media.
Okay, got you.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Lenard Montoute, and Mr. Joseph.
Always nice to be here at Rev-Up.
Thank you very much. Listen again next week, Thursday, same time from 9 o'clock, 9 a.m. until 11 a.m. for another Meet the Opposition exclusively on Rev-Up St. Lucia. Well, this is the end of My Stint Here on Rev-Up for today. Thanks a lot for listening. God willing, you can check me out tomorrow morning, same time, 5 o'clock for another Wake Up and Live. Up next, we have Kina. She'll be with you until 3 this afternoon. From 3 until 6, gonna be Zen the DJ. Do enjoy your day. So long.